One source of feeling depressed is the persistent feeling of falling behind. And I see this way too often, that people are kind of feeling like they've fallen behind and everyone else is kind of moving on with their life, and here I am kind of stuck, unable to kind of catch up. And so in order to understand and overcome this sense of falling behind, we're going to start by sort of exploring where it comes from. Then we're going to look at how it manifests in the mind. Then we're going to take a look at what our mind normally tries to do to fix it. And finally, we'll show you guys a different way to kind of overcome this sensation. So to begin with, the sense of falling behind starts with something that I usually call the problem of escalating impossibility. So this is best illustrated if you think about procrastinating before a test. So let's say that I have a test that's a month away, and I kind of look at my syllabus and I say, okay, I need to study 1 hour a day for the rest of the month and I'll be fine. 1 hour a day for 1 month and I'm going to get an A on the test, no problem. And so is that what we actually do? Absolutely not, right? A couple days go by, we're definitely not going to study because our mind is telling us, hey, I have plenty of time. I just need to study 1 hour a day. We have 27 days left. No big deal. We're good. And then a week goes by. And now you start to have this little thought in the back of your mind, hey, maybe I should start studying. Like, actually, a week has gone by and I haven't even cracked the books, like not even once. I'm gonna have to study about maybe 1.5 hours a day, but that's still super manageable. I can do that every single day. And then as that thought kind of crawls up in the back of your mind, you actually try to push it away, right? So we start to distract ourselves by maybe playing video games or watching TV or whatever. In the back of your mind, your thought is there as you watch each episode, binge watching. Oh, maybe I should start studying now. Maybe I should start studying now. But instead you're like, no, let's just keep watching. Just don't worry about it. We'll be fine. We have plenty of time. And then 2 weeks roll by. And now we've got a couple of weeks left. And now the panic just starts to set in just a tiny amount. I've wasted 2 weeks. But I've still got 2 weeks left and I can still do it. 2 hours a day and I'll be totally fine for the test. And then each day that goes by that we don't study, the panic grows a little bit. And then we get into this vicious cycle because the more the panic grows, the harder it becomes to study. And then I find myself being like, okay, I have 10 days left. It's the weekend. Oh my God, am I going to be able to do it? And then what we end up doing is like partying all weekend long because we don't want to think about the test. And the more negative emotion we feel, the more we have to distract ourselves, the more we have to try to forget. And every day that goes by, it can feel like that perfect score on the test is getting further and further away. And then you have to study 5 hours a day. And then you have to study 8 hours a day. And at some point, it starts to feel impossible. And at some point, you kind of feel this gigantic mishmash of regret for not starting earlier. Last minute panic to kind of push you forward and actually start studying finally. And also like kicking yourself because, oh man, this would have been so easy if I had started earlier. And so in this jumble of emotions, it's like all of these emotions that we're feeling, we show up and we take the test and we try to forget about it immediately, right? We go and we distract ourselves, we go party, oh my God, thank God it's over. So the question becomes, where did all of that emotional energy that was building up over the course of the month, where did it go? Because you feel that instant relief, it's over, it's in the past, push it out of my mind as hard as I can. The problem is that each time we do that, that sense that emotional energy sort of gets buried in our mind as a samskar. And we sort of have this sense that I'm someone who's fallen behind. And if you look at this idea that I've fallen behind and that's why my life isn't good, there are going to be moments in your life where it may not have been something like a test, but there are moments where you saw other people doing things or you knew you were capable of something and you weren't able to live up to it. And so this emotional energy goes dormant in your mind as a samskar and pops up from time to time and tells you, oh, you're behind, you're behind, you're behind. So how does this samskar actually manifest in your mind? And this is where we have to do a quick review of Vedic psychology, because remember that when the samskar becomes active, we feel negative emotion, and then our ego steps in and starts tampering around with things. And our ego goes to our intellect, or our buddhi, and tries to bully it by giving lots of information that's very selective to support the way that we feel. right? And if you guys have worked with someone or maybe had a friend who's depressed or you felt this way yourself, maybe you've noticed that when you are feeling depressed, other people can reassure you, but what your mind does is come up with all this evidence to disprove them wrong. You know, when you're feeling like you're unlovable and are going to be lonely for the rest of your life, and someone comes to you and says, don't worry, man, there are other fish in the sea, which is statistically absolutely a correct statement. There are tons of other fish in the sea. But what does your mind do? It says, yeah, that doesn't apply to me because I am unlovable. Your mind comes up with all of these logical reasons why things are not right and why the way that you feel is actually true. And we see this in the samskara of falling behind. And what your mind tends to do is create this perfect Frankenstein of other people who are doing better than you. So you may look at one person who's, smarter than you, and another person who's better looking, and a third person who's more in shape, and a fourth person who's more charismatic. And you look at all of these people that maybe you went to high school with or you were friends with when y'all were 8 years old, and your mind looks at them and says, you see how well that person's doing? Man, you are so far behind them. And you're so far behind this person, and you're so far behind this person. You are so far behind. Do you see how you're behind everyone? When in reality, what it's doing is it's ignoring stuff, right? Like your friend who's actually in investment banking has like a really bad drug problem. And your friend who is super handsome is actually a complete asshole. And so your mind does all of this selective sort of thinking. And the more selective the thinking is, the more it tries to reinforce the idea that you're behind. And this is really important, and this is what the yogis figured out, is that in the mind of this person, they believe that their emotion, the samskar, the belief of falling behind, is a logical conclusion from the evidence that they've put together. But really what's happening is that emotion actually comes first. You felt like you were falling behind. And then what your mind does is scans all of the evidence to support it. So it's kind of bizarre, but really what your mind is trying to do is convince you that you've fallen behind. And then what we get to is what your mind tells you to do once it's convinced you. Because what do you do if you've fallen behind? And what does your mind tell you you should be doing? What it says is that you have to catch up, right? And the further behind you fall, the more important it is to catch up. And this is where things get really, really tricky, because if my mind is telling me, okay, I've fallen behind, fine. My mind is telling me time to catch up. So why don't we catch up, right? Why don't we just get up and we say, okay, I've got 2 weeks left, I'm going to study extra hard, and I'm just going to get it done. Because the truth is that people who've fallen behind, it almost feels like they never catch up. And why is that? And that's because catching up in and of itself is actually a terrible way to move forward. Catching up actually is very paralyzing. And I know it sounds kind of weird, but this is the way that I want you guys to think about it. If I've fallen behind and I have to catch up, what does my mind tell me when I take the first step? What does it look at? Was that useful? Not really. And if you look at people whose minds are telling them to catch up, any step you take forward feels like it's not enough. And the further behind you've fallen, anything that you do can kind of feel like it's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough. So this is something that I understand really, really well, because it's something that I struggled with a lot. And I remember several years ago, I went to a Christmas party. And this was about 10 years after high school, and I ran into some people that I hadn't seen in a long time. And so we were at this Christmas party, I was 26 or 27, and I ran into an old friend of mine, and I was kind of asking her, I was like, oh, what are you up to now? And she's like, oh, I'm training to become a surgeon. I went to college, I went to medical school, and now I'm in my surgery training. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then she asked me, oh, look, what are you up to? And I was like, yeah, well, I'm applying to medical school. And I felt so ashamed in that moment. I felt so behind. Because here's someone that I used to sit next to in high school, and look how far she's come. And I haven't even gotten in. I don't even know if I'm gonna get into medical school. And she's already done with it. And it can feel so shaming to be in that situation. And when I think about what my mind tells me in that moment, it tells me, man, do you have a lot of catching up to do. And this is the tricky thing, is that the more that I have to catch up, the bigger the mountain that I need to climb, the more insignificant any step I need to take is. And this is the real problem with catching up, which is that catching up is an action that's wrapped in an expectation. And what I mean by that is that the actions that I have to take, irrespective of whether I'm behind or not, that's just all a mental construction. The actions that I have to take are actually exactly the same. Whether I'm trying to lose a bunch of weight, if I'm trying to lose 100 pounds or 50 pounds or 20 pounds, the action is still the same. It's still to go to the gym. The problem is that if I'm trying to lose 100 pounds and I go to the gym, then it feels like I haven't really taken a step forward. And so as I try to catch up, the more my mind tells me you need to catch up, you need to catch up, you need to catch up, the harder it is to actually take one step forward. So bizarrely, what we need to do in order to move forward is to let go of catching up. And if we want to move forward from falling behind, what we really need to do is let go of catching up and this idea that you've fallen behind. Because it doesn't matter. I mean, behind is a mental construction. Catching up is a mental construction. If you want to get into shape, you have to go to the gym. That's the only way forward. Your way forward is exactly the same. And this complex of falling behind and catching up is just layered on top of your mind and makes every action way more hard. So then that begs the question, why is it so damn hard to let go of catching up? Why is it so damn hard to let go of falling behind? And this is where the redemption arc comes in. Because we've been raised on a culture of triumph, that the hero at 45 minutes into the movie is, everything is stacked against him. And that's when you dig deep and you really win and you become an amazing person. So I remember after that Christmas party, I went home and I was like laying in bed and I was thinking the only way that I can catch up is I have to go to Harvard because she didn't go to Harvard. And if I go to Harvard, I'm going to do better than her. I'll be better than her. I can actually catch up. The more far behind I fall, the more I have to become awesome and magnificent. If I've dropped out of college, I have to start a $1 billion tech startup to make up for it. And in that moment, what our mind is trying to do is we have all of this dormant emotional energy, all of these times that we've told ourselves, you can do better, you should have started studying earlier, why are you so dumb, why didn't you start, why didn't you start, why didn't you start? All that emotional energy is sitting down there. And so what our mind has to do is, I need a triumph, I need a victory. I need something that can make me feel so good about myself that it's stronger than all of that toxicity of me being a person who's fallen behind. And that's the real problem, is because if I tell you to stop catching up, if I tell you to let go of catching up, what are you letting go of is that fantasy of that triumph. You become, in your mind, the hero who just quits at 45 minutes, right? Instead of triumphing over everything and being the victor, I'm suddenly just a guy who is 26 years old and applying to medical school. So the desire to catch up is actually what keeps us stuck. And if you really want to move forward, you have to let that go. You have to let go of the entire construction, right? Because what does it mean to have fallen behind? It's a construct of the mind. What does it mean to catch up? It's a construct of the mind. What does it mean to have triumph and redemption? It's all thoughts in my head. If I meet my friend, next year at the Christmas party, it's just a conversation I'm going to have. If I'm in medical school, I'm in medical school. If I've caught up, I've caught up. If I haven't, whatever. It's all the same. If I'm a medical student, I'm a medical student. Reality is one thing, and we just layer a construct on top of it. So the way to move forward is to let go of catching up. The way to move forward is to recognize that action can only be taken in the present. And moving forward may never let me catch up, but I don't need to catch up. All I really need to do to become unstuck is to move forward. And so the problem of falling behind, this samskara of falling behind, is something that people struggle with a lot. And my hope is that by understanding how it's born, how it manifests, how our mind tries to deal with it, we can actually take a slightly different approach. We can unplug that entire mental construction and start to actually do something that moves our life in the right direction. Is this okay?
Yes. Lift your hands. Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, I am.
Fine.
That's right, I'm very fine.
Okay.
An exploration of the Marianas Trench. Take 2.